Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. It's about the Fountain Summit 2021. We've got Akintunde Oyebode joining us next. He's the Commissioner for Finance and Economic Development. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, what a time to have this summit, Fountain Summit 2021. I mean, you saddled with economic development responsibilities. How are you going about it?
So it's first articulating a vision of what we want Ekiti to look like. Everything starts with the vision. So we set out to do a 25-year economic plan, something that builds a legacy that outlives our government and even a few of the successor governments. So that 25-year plan really drives, the economic policy of the state government. We've looked at three critical sectors as our areas of focus. First is obvious. We're in Ekiti, the fountain of knowledge. I like to say we have the highest PhD per capita in the country. So it's leveraging that knowledge economy. And all of that is centered around what we've called the Ekiti Knowledge Zone, which is 1,000 hectares of physical land space and sits within what we call the Knowledge Quadrangle. So there's Afe Babalola University, there's Ekiti State University, there's Bamidele Olumilua University of Science and Technology, Ikere, there's Federal Poly, Ado, and there's still a few colleges sprinkled around. So that knowledge zone is going to be a special economic zone, focused on the service industry. So things like business process outsourcing, to try to compete with Vietnam, with India, with Philippines, for that BPO economy. Things like software development, things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc. Just leveraging the talent pool from the universities, but also ensuring that we have high-speed internet connectivity. So if you recall, the governor, via an executive order, slashed the cost of laying fiber from 4,500 naira per linear meter to 145 naira per linear meter. It wasn't just something, it wasn't a token of generosity. It was part of a strategic plan, to ensure that we attract the providers of high-speed internet into the state. We bring the talent pool from our universities, and now we've gotten a grant of $250,000 from the African Development Bank to actually build out the full feasibility for the knowledge zone. So that's on one, the knowledge economy. Two is agriculture. Ekiti people are largely agrarian. So we focused on some strategic crops. Today we have rice mills in Ekiti, GMK Foods, the mill is almost installed. Dangote and Stallion are coming. On the cassava side, we have companies like FMS Farms, we have companies like Promise Point, Arog, who are doing effectively cassava into starch and ethanol. And of course, our flagship PPP opportunities at Ikuderi Farm, where we flipped 76% of the company to Promasido Nigeria, and that farm is now delivering 80,000 liters of milk per month from a farm that literally never worked for 40 years. The third and final sector is tourism. And that's why we're hosting NAFEST in a few weeks, but also optimizing things like Ikogosi Warm Spring, Arita Waterfalls, and the rich culture and heritage of Ekiti. So there are other things that underpin that I'll speak to, but it's really focused on three critical sectors.
But the one question that I want to ask is all about doing business, right?
Correct.
The natural question would be, what's the get-in approach like? Talking about the ease of doing business, parameters and all of that. Going from table to table is a task, a challenge, a disservice, and it's depressing. I mean, especially when you talk about, government at various levels. That's the experience many people have had. So to have attracted the private sector practitioners that Ekiti State has attracted so far, what was the model, and what is the model now for jump-starting and fast-tracking economic development and investment?
Thank you very much. So I had the honor and privilege of being the pioneer Director General of the Ekiti State Development and Investment Promotion Agency. The first thing to acknowledge is you need a dedicated institution of government to focus on the business environment, to focus on onboarding investors, and even when the investors come, to focus on aftercare. How do you support the investors when they are here? Because it's like dating or marrying. You meet a partner, you woo them, you convince them you are the right partner, but then the business really starts when the relationship has been established. It's the same way with investors. So the Ekiti State Development and Investment Promotion Agency, EGDIPA is a one-stop shop focused on supporting investors who are coming into state to onboard them. So today, you want to register as a taxpayer, you can do that digitally. Our GIS infrastructure is about to be launched, which means, of course, you can now, in a few weeks, you'll be able to search for titles electronically. You'll be able to register your title fairly quickly. These are things that affect the investment environment. The Ministry of Justice, collaborating with the House of Assembly and the judiciary, has also enhanced the enforcement of contracts process. There's a small claims court in Ekiti today, which means, small matters which normally should not cost you a lot, to resolve in the courts, can be resolved fairly quickly and fairly cheaply. So these are the things, these are the pillars that improve the business environment. Enforcement of contracts, land registration, tax payments, business premises registration. Many of these things are being digitized. And within the one-stop shop, we have people from the different agencies of government resident there. So you literally can go there and solve 90 to 95% of your problems.
We're still going to talk about those three pillars, but I want to use that analogy of marriage. Beyond the couple is the family. The family will also help to ensure that the marriage works, right? So, but family here, I'm talking about the relatives of the people the person who is bringing a spouse into the band. That's talking about the people in the community. What's the stake of the people in the PPP arrangements? What are the opportunities for the people of Ekiti themselves to invest? Because, you can't go and bring somebody from outside when there are opportunities that the people themselves could have taken advantage of.
Fantastic question. So let's take Ikunderi Farm as an example. Today, Ikunderi Farm employs over 300 people. Those people didn't come from out of space. They came from, particularly mainly Ikun, Ekiti, the host community. Right? So that host community today is thriving. The Oye-Ikun Otun Road, which the government has just finished reconstructing and which will soon be inaugurated, that road connects Oye to Ikun because of that farm. It wasn't just done, it's a strategic investment. Because as a small state with fiscal limitations, we can't solve all the problems at the same time. So we've got to be strategic about selecting what we do. So we've connected that community to a significant road network. There's power in that community. Those farmers in Ikun are working on the farms at Ikunderi Farm. And of course, one of the things that we're planning to do is to build an arrangement for host communities where they have some stake in the entity. As long as they're able to put themselves together in a trust, then they also have to take into perpetuity. So that there's host community involvement and host about individual investors. Many of the investors that we're talking about are not out of Ekiti. Many of them are actually Ekiti people who are putting their money in Ekiti. FMS Farms is owned by an Ekiti woman, for example, who's a chemical engineer. She's on one of our panels later today, and you'll hear from her. She will talk about both her challenges and what has worked. A number of these agri businesses are owned by Ekiti people. Dr. Tokpe Aroge is a medical doctor turned farmer who's put his money where his mouth is. So these are not necessarily, yes, there's a Dangote conversation, there's a Stallion conversation, but many of the people are actually Ekiti people. And you spin off a lot of small businesses off things like this, right? So we think with improving the quality of broadband infrastructure, there are young boys in Ekiti, people like Shola Matthew, people like Kim Plus Technologies. These are young Ekiti technology entrepreneurs who are building businesses out of Ekiti. Last point, even when we set up our board of internal revenue and constituted the board, we also had a lady, Mrs. Lola Aluko, young lady who runs a natural beauty business, right? We put her on the board of the Internal Revenue Service as the voice of not just the entrepreneur, but the young female entrepreneur, to ensure that their voices are heard in our decision-making process.
Yeah. One wonders, at the end of the day, how do you measure your success? I know you set parameters and standards of measurement, because, for instance, and correct this is wrong since you're in finance, January 2021, we understand there was a reported revenue of 4.4 and then expenditure of 4.3. So practically everything goes on recurrent expenditure. Is there a target for finance in terms of if this amount of money comes in at the end of the day, I think we've done some. So what's the thinking in that regard?
Thanks, Chamberlain. I think, you've got to also recognize that nation building is an unending exercise. So you keep improving. Now, what we've inherited is a state that has significant fiscal weaknesses. So you're right? The total revenues that come to state can barely cover recurrent expenditure. So but you first have to enlarge that pie, and that's a process, right? And how do you enlarge the pie? You have to bring in new businesses. You've got to bring in private capital. Those private businesses have to grow and thrive and start to pay taxes, right? And that will take some time. So you have to do these things correctly. You can't circumvent the process. It's one of the mistakes that we often make, that we think that we can do these things overnight. Now, where are we today? We're bringing in new businesses. Those businesses are creating jobs, right? 5 years from now, we might no longer be in government, but you start to see the real outcomes. And how do you measure this? Of course, the first one is GDP growth, right? By how much is the state's economy growing? Second one is per capita income, right? How much is in the pockets of people? How much disposable income do you have in their pockets? Third one is employment numbers, right? You want to ensure that you drop unemployment below, in my opinion, 5%. Now, the fourth one in terms of the fiscal strength of the state is our first goal is that our IGR must first cover recurrent expenditure, right? And the mindset behind that is your recurrent expenditure is what should generate that money, should pay itself out. When you do that, you can then focus your federally collected revenues on capital expenditure. But at some point, you've got to ensure that your internally generated revenues cover your total expenditure so that whatever you get from the federation account then becomes some savings for the rainy day.
But there is a concern being raised that it appears that Ekiti State is just winking in the dark. Just check their website now. Very little details about the development strides in the state. Is it a deliberate plan not to blow your own trumpets?
I mean, I think you can't, if there's one thing you can accuse us of, is that we focus too much on the work and not speaking about what we do as,
we hereby accuse you.
But that's why I'm here today, right? So we're correcting that. They say whenever you wake up is your morning, right? So, but I think on even our website, one of the things that we're good with, and we're now second on most of the transparency indicators, right? So if you look at all the transparency indexes, I think beyond one state I won't mention and give free publicity, we're next in line. And we've grown significantly. So we do a lot of proactive disclosures, and we just revamped our Freedom of Information Administration portal and process to ensure that we let people know, right? There's nothing hidden. We do quarterly state of the state accounts, and we let all stakeholders know this is the state of your state, right? And I think for me, that's what starts the conversation. Because all of these things we're saying in here needs the engagement of the people who have to pay the taxes. You've got to earn their trust to say, we're putting our commonwealth in your hands, in your trust, to do the best for us.
So how are you working around the fact that whatever investments will come into Ekiti State is going to also feed off the larger economy of the country? So what's the approach towards that?
I mean, I think that's, again, a very good question. I think what you've got to do is there's always going to be limitations, right? So you have to answer two questions. Why Nigeria and why Ekiti? When we started, who have answered the why Nigeria question, right? Which is why you won't see us, up and down the place looking for foreign investors all around the place. We're very strategic about where we go and who we talk to. We literally talk to people before you see us get on a plane. It means 70% of the work is done, right? We're only going to close. But if you look at most of the investors that we have, these are all entities already operational in Nigeria that have already answered the why Nigeria question. So it's really just the why Ekiti question. And that's just a pragmatic approach to targeting investors that we've adopted.
We can't circumvent the fact that there will be challenges that people will have to contend with.
Of course.
From, where you sit as the one in charge of economic development, what are some of those challenges that a prospective investor, whether from within Nigeria or those who want to answer the why Ekiti and why Nigeria at the same time, what are some of those challenges they have to contend with, and how is Ekiti getting ahead of it?
I mean, elephant in the room is security, right? Every time people say, will I get kidnapped if I come here, blah, blah, It doesn't matter if I drive on those roads. I tell them I'm on those roads all the time.
Yeah.
You know, there's the perception, right, of insecurity. In Ekiti, we've invested heavily in security. We've got an emergency control center. We're putting cameras around the states. We have eyes in the sky. There are a number of things that we've invested in that I can't see on air. But we've put some significant investment in security and supporting the security apparatus. And we've also complemented that with, of course, our own Southwest Amotekun team, who then have local knowledge, right, of the operating environment to complement the work being done by the security agency. So that's the first thing, and that's how we're resolving that. Of course, there are problems around infrastructure, power. We're just now doing a 4.75 megawatt IPP. The turning of the sword is happening in a couple of days. And that IPP is to complement the power being consumed from the grid. But outside, you know, the IPP, there are projects that we're doing with TCN, you know, just to improve the transmission capabilities within the states. There are mini-grid solutions that we're doing in specific agro-alike in those communities have power for small-scale processing. So power is another problem. I think the last one I'll talk about is transportation, right? I mean, I know you guys arrived in Akure. If you had gone through the Ado-Ikere Road, I'm sure Chamberlain won't have this white grin on his face. But we're working with the African Development Bank and the federal government, right, to ensure that that road is reconstructed. And we're also putting in our own little airport in Ekiti, because Ekiti is a landlocked state. And so we're putting our own airport here to ensure that people can move in and out of the state fairly quickly. So these are investments. When we said we're doing the Oye-Ikun Otun Road, it's to get to Ikunderi Farm. When we say we do the Ilupeju-Ire Igbemo Road, it's to get to Ire Clay Brick Limited, where you have to evacuate heavy-duty clay. When we say we're doing the Aramoko, Erijin, or Ikogosi Road, it's to ensure that if you want to go to Ikogosi one spring for the weekend, you don't go in there and the first thing you have to book is a massage. So our investments are actually very strategic to solve problems that we have identified as the problems that investors have. If you look at what we've done with water, just providing potable water, it's a big thing for agriculture as well. Because those dams, Ero Dam that we just rehabilitated, Ero Dam supplies Ikunderi Farm today and can supply farms within the special agro-industrial processing zone so that we can now have all-season farming in Ekiti. And we're doing that with Itapaji, we're doing that with Egbe Dam, you know, so we identify problems that investors have, and then we use our limited resources to try to solve those problems.
Well, just talked about some tourist sites there, so sounds really interesting, but I guess that's what we'll focus on next. But we do thank you for coming on. Akintunde Oyebode, Commissioner for Finance and Economic Development, so talking about the Fountain Summit 2021. All the best, though.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We're back in a moment. Stay with us.